The following program contains graphic images and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
911, what's the address, the emergency? Okay, do you know what happened to him?
He got killed by snakes.
My brother bred large, rare snakes for a living.
He was like the Johnny Depp of pythons.
Was this some sort of revenge killing?
So maybe somebody wanted the animals, wanted some money out of that.
This is crazy. No suspect, no one's under arrest.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hey, I'm Lynlee Renick.
He was absolutely head over heels in love with her.
I know.
She came to the spa one morning and said that she had woke up in the middle of the night and he was on top of her, inside of her, raping her while she was asleep.
They wanted to try to find somebody to shoot him.
The defendant, Lynlee Renick, shot her husband, Ben, 8 times.
I did not kill Ben, and I did not want him dead.
If the devil was a person, I believe that was her.
She built it all up to make it look like she was innocent.
All I can do now is just sit up here and tell the truth. And at least I will have gotten it out. And I won't have to carry it anymore.
When 29-year-old Ben Renick was murdered in 2017, first responders thought he may have been killed by one of his snakes. He was a world-renowned snake breeder with a wife and 2 young children. It would take years before the cold-blooded killer would be brought to justice, and as the investigation unfolded, dark secrets would spill out, revealing a brutal story of betrayal. I'm Ted Rollins, and this is Victim to Verdict: Murder on a Snake Farm. In early 2017, on this sprawling 72-acre property just outside Columbia, Missouri, Ben and Lynlee Renick seemed to be enjoying the perfect life. A young couple raising 2 children in a small town of New Florence with a population of less than 1,000 people. In addition, both Ben and Lynlee were working their dream jobs. Lynlee owned a local spa in town, while Ben ran his own company, Renick Reptiles.
My brother bred large, rare snakes for a living. And he was very articulate when it comes to genetics. And he helped design several different species.
Here we have a normal sunset right here.
Ben's business was mainly on breeding ball python snakes. He sold and shipped them to people around the world and made a lot of money.
We're talking hundreds of snakes that sometimes can sell for thousands of dollars.
Ben Renick's customers wanted particular designs on their snakes, and Ben had a knack. Through breeding, he could produce the exact color and pattern they were looking for.
Super nice guy, fresh young face, came into the industry and literally blew up overnight, it felt like. Everybody knew who he was.
He was like the Johnny Depp of pythons. Like, he really was. Like, he could do no wrong. The guy was amazing.
Ben ran the snake company out of the family farm in an outbuilding, which was filled with clear bins, each holding rare snakes, small and large.
Ben was one of those people very early on, you could just tell, kind of emoted this passion for these reptiles that you could tell within 2 minutes of talking to him.
You know, you'd see Ben at all the shows, and just a super nice kid, just super, always happy, smile on his face, just a very humble, nice guy.
Stop on over and stop over and say hi to Ben and take a look at some of his awesome animals. Thanks, Ben. The story of the Renicks in Montgomery County is certainly strange.
It's a fascinating story. It's just that there were just so many hard times. Everybody made too much money. It ruined the family, unfortunately.
The family's money came from 2 generations of selling pet food. Sam and Ben's parents, Frank and Charlene, owned Spectrum Pet Foods, and in the small town of New Florence, everybody knew that the Renicks were doing very well.
They were well off. There's no question about that. They were eccentric. If they had one thing, they had three things. They always made sure the boys had everything they ever wanted.
You have the Renick family, this well-off family, living on this massive piece of land. Then, in the early 1990s, there's this huge explosion.
The farm blew up at one point. There was actually a home explosion. The Renick's homes exploded.
It was awful. We lived in a trailer there on the property while it took us 10 years to rebuild the house.
The gas explosion would end up raising some eyebrows. In fact, the Rennick's insurance company refused a claim to rebuild because it was determined that the explosion was most likely intentional.
Right after the house blew up, my mother was diagnosed with cancer.
Charlene Renick would fight her cancer, but eventually died in 2008. By this point, the family's finances were virtually drained between the explosion and Charlene's medical bills. And things were about to get worse.
In 2012, Ben Renick's father, Frank, is arrested on fraud charges.
Yeah, he unfortunately took a lot of investor money and used it for purposes that were not for the business.
Weeks after he was indicted for fraud, Frank Renick would commit suicide.
My brother called me. It was Father's Day. They found him on the patio. He shot himself through the heart. It's been tragedy after tragedy after tragedy after tragedy my entire life, and I can't wait for that to end.
Coming up, more tragedy for the surviving brothers, Sam and Ben.
And then Lynlee took me back in and directed me to where the body was. He was on his belly, and I flipped him over. His skull was crushed. You know, I thought it was a snake, and I came out of there covered in blood.
Plus, a murder mystery in the snake house.
There was no answers. Maybe somebody knew how much the animals were worth, so maybe somebody wanted the animals, wanted some money out of that.
The Court TV podcast will return. The following program contains graphic images and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
In 2012, Ben and Sam Renick were mourning the death of their father, Frank, who, after being indicted for financial fraud, took his own life. The brothers, both in their 20s, who had also lost their mother a few years earlier, were left with a sprawling 72-acre property in rural Missouri. Ben, who raised and sold snakes for a living, had recently fallen in love with an old high school friend named Lynlee Gallatin.
He was absolutely head over heels in love with her.
They shared a lot of interest in music and film and things like that. And I know that they had a lot of fun together.
There really seems to be an instant connection between Lynlee and Ben. But it's not just about Lynlee coming into Ben's life. She also has a son who he accepts as his own.
He just scooped Matthew right up. And he took to Matthew like he was his own. And then we find out that they're expecting.
The romance between Ben and Lynlee continued. They eventually had a daughter together, a little girl by the name of Emma. And then in 2014, when Emma was 2, they got married. Meanwhile, Ben's snake business continues to grow, and right by his side is Lynlee.
So here Ben is going to show you essentially what we do from the moment that they hatch out of the eggs. We put labels on every clutch that goes into the incubator with the parents.
They were great. They were just a clean-cut, fresh young couple that were on a great trajectory in an industry that they were doing very, very well at. Things seem to be going very well for the family. And they're not just breeding snakes, they're making cash. And you've got this sprawling 72 acres that they're living on.
Ben's brother Sam and his wife and their kids also lived on the property, which the brothers inherited from their parents.
You know, on the weekends, we had a lot of time to see each other. The kids had time to see each other, and it was nice.
Ben became the sole owner of the property. Sam was having marriage problems and wanted to avoid the risk of losing the family land in a messy divorce, so he signed it all over to Ben.
I promised my mother in her dying breath that I was going to take care of the land and the property and save it for our children. And that's what I was trying to do.
In 2016, Ben's wife, Lynlee, who was originally focusing mainly on the family's snake breeding business, had decided to do something on her own, opening and running a new spa in downtown Columbia.
Getting her nails done. Who's helping you? What can I get your name? Hey, I'm Lynlee. I'm the owner here.
Essentia Spa was located in West Columbia. It's a little business district out off of Scott Boulevard in West Columbia.
For Lynlee, this was a dream come true. Before marrying Ben, she was a massage therapist and always wanted to own her own business, which, given Ben's success as a snake breeder, now was possible.
He was able to fund that. I can remember going up there on her grand opening, and, she's so excited about it.
Less than a year later, Ben Renick would be dead.
911, what's the address, the emergency?
Ben Renick is found dead on the floor of his warehouse where he keeps all these snakes. Incredible tragedy.
Oh, God. I with my kids there in the car, and I went to go check on him, and I saw him on the ground.
Okay, do you know what happened to him?
Lynlee also calls Sam to the snake facility after seeing Ben's body. He believes at the time that a snake might have killed his brother.
Ben? Oh, God. Oh, God.
Okay, do you know anything, like how long he's been there? Do you know?
Oh, he's gone.
What may have happened?
He got killed by a snake.
By a snake?
He raised this large 500-pound snake.
Lynlee was hysterical. She was running around in circles outside the facility, and, well, she wasn't making sense. She was not, I couldn't get a full sentence out of her. I couldn't find Ben, and then Lynlee took me back in and directed me to where the body was. He was on his belly, and I flipped him over. His skull was crushed, and I came out of there covered in blood.
The police arrive, and they're looking for a large snake that they got out. They have a shotgun out looking for this snake.
Arlie, you snake to my neck, you better shoot that thing. I got him. Fellas, something got him. Paramedics said there's a bite mark on him, so if there's a snake, we send here.
Lynlee is hysterical, screaming it couldn't have been a snake that killed Ben.
The whole building full of snakes, of snakes. They're the sweetest of sweetest, anything that we see in the house.
It was several hours later that the medical examiner had walked outside to catch a breath of air, and I had gone up to him and I asked him what happened, and he let me know that it was in fact not a snake, but he was a victim of a gunshot wound, multiple gunshot wounds.
Ben's body was found at the far end of the snake facility. He was shot 8 times in the back and in the head, and the gunshot wound to the head was at close range.
Ben was found with a contact gun wound to his head. That means the muzzle was literally against the head when he was shot.
Maybe it was a break-in, maybe somebody trolling around rural properties, trying to maybe steal farm equipment. Something escalates beyond what it was supposed to be.
Everything is reeling through our minds like, okay, somebody was there for the snakes, or they were looking for drugs, or they were looking for money, and they surprised Ben. Ben surprised them. It had to be something like that.
News of Ben's murder quickly spreads to the reptile and snake community. The mystery of who killed Ben is on everyone's mind, and those that knew Ben began to question everything.
The first question that we asked was, how many snakes were missing? Because your first thought is he was murdered because somebody came to steal his snakes.
For investigators, their first thoughts are to look at the people who were closest to Ben Renick and whoever was there when his body was discovered. So that's Lynlee and his brother Sam.
I was immediately forthcoming with everything with the police. I gave them the shirt off my back, literally. I took a polygraph. I did every single thing I could possibly do.
Another possibility was the family's history. Ben's father, Frank, had spent years conning people out of money in what investigators claimed was a Ponzi scheme.
The family was wondering whether or not this murder was somehow connected to Frank's past, his legal troubles. Was this some sort of revenge killing?
They'd never come after the boys before, so why would they now?
Investigators were tight-lipped, and no one was getting any answers. The only thing that was certain was that Ben was not coming back.
When it hit, it was kind of devastating for everybody. Just a simple, nice guy. When he's taken like that, and anybody that's taken in that manner, it was terrible.
Ben's customers, peers, and fans raised thousands of dollars to help Lynlee and the kids.
The outpour of support and love after Ben's murder was unbelievable. So many people that respected what he did and he'd worked with throughout the years, and it was beautiful. It was very special, and I think it would have meant the world to Ben.
Then there was the funeral, which was very difficult for everybody, but especially for Ben's stepson, Matthew.
He was so upset and so just distraught. Matthew was screaming, "Why, Mom, why?"
Coming up, as the investigation into Ben's death continues, questions start to emerge about his wife, Lynlee.
We heard that she was a suspect. Well, isn't the spouse always the first suspect?
Do you have any thoughts or ideas looking to know what happened tonight?
It didn't make sense. Things that don't make sense are usually really off. And then apparently she was cheating on him.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
In late 2019, it had been almost 2.5 years since 29-year-old Ben Renick was killed with a gunshot at close range, and nobody was in custody. Renick had made his name as a successful snake breeder, and the fact that his murder remained unsolved was extremely frustrating, especially for his family and friends.
Why aren't they finding somebody? Lynlee, I'd ask her. I was always calling Sam, too. Sam, have you heard anything new? Anything going on?
It was extremely frustrating for those couple of years when we didn't have answers. People would talk about it at expos.
One of the running theories was that Ben was killed for his snakes, worth thousands of dollars. Or maybe it was tied to his late father, who, after an alleged life of crime, had committed suicide after stealing millions of dollars from investors. Could that have been the motive?
Maybe somebody knew how much the animals were worth, so maybe somebody wanted the animals, wanted some money out of that. That's what we all kind of thought it was a robbery gone wrong for forever.
This is crazy. No suspect, no one's under arrest, but police did have their eye on someone, and the family would soon find out who that person was.
That person was Lynlee, Ben's wife. She was the one that found the body and called 911. Investigators say they were suspicious from day one, but didn't have enough evidence for an arrest. They decided to tell the family that they believed that Lynlee was responsible.
We heard that she was a suspect. Well, isn't the spouse always the first suspect? We still can't be. There was no reason to believe that it would have been her.
One of the things that raised eyebrows for investigators is the fact that Lynlee agreed to a polygraph exam, and she failed it.
Okay, how do you think you did, Lynlee?
I did a good job.
Okay, so the results of the polygraph showed that you failed the test. Showed that you were lying. We just need to find out why. That's the fact. We just need to find out.
I can't explain why I failed that, but I didn't kill Ben.
Well, the family still couldn't believe that Lynlee would be involved in this murder. Looking back in hindsight, there were some things that didn't make a lot of sense.
One of those things was the fact that Lynlee, within months of Ben's death, seemed to go out of her way to isolate herself from Ben's family and friends, which they didn't understand, but assumed it was all part of her way of dealing with grief.
We brushed it off because how does a grieving widow act? I don't know.
They wouldn't even let me into the funeral service. They had to wait for her to get there because Ben's remains were in there. She didn't want me near them. I thought it was all it was strange.
Something else that the family thought was strange and definitely raised eyebrows was that 6 months after Ben's murder, Lynlee announced to the world on social media that she was in a new relationship.
She jumps into another relationship and has a child with one of her lovers. Not to mention her decision to sell the property while I was on it, I mean, that's another big red flag.
With Ben dead, Lynlee became the sole owner of the Renick family property, and despite the fact that Sam and his family were living there, she decided to sell it for nearly $800,000. And just like that, the land belonged to somebody else.
It didn't make sense. Things that don't make sense are usually really off. And then apparently she was cheating on him.
It turns out when Ben died, she was having an affair, and apparently it wasn't her first. Lynlee had several affairs during the marriage.
When it came out that Lynlee was cheating on Ben, people could not believe it.
I didn't know that the marriage was in any kind of jeopardy. Couldn't have, in my wildest dreams, imagined that she would be having an affair. Not to mention multiple affairs. That would have been unthinkable at the time. Ben did not know. I don't think Ben would have stayed in the marriage if he'd known.
It's unclear whether or not Ben knew his wife was having an affair during their marriage. Detectives found out about it early in the investigation, which added to their suspicion around Lynlee's possible involvement.
Okay. Did you think the same way? Yeah. We've been very glad we've never going to leave my wife. Well, that's good because we're going to leave my husband.
Coming up, a major break in the case, which would send investigators in multiple directions.
They wanted to try to find somebody to shoot him.
And Lynlee comes up with a completely different story.
And then I heard shots ring out, and I screamed, and I ran outside.
Lynlee Renick has had multiple affairs, and she's failed her polygraph exam, but they still don't have enough evidence to make an arrest.
Police need a break in the case. This case is going nowhere.
Ben and Lynlee Renick began dating in 2011. At the time, he was an up-and-coming snake breeder with family money. She was a massage therapist and a mother with a little boy. By 2014, the two were married. Ben had become a father figure to Lynlee's son, and together they had a little girl. His snake breeding business had taken off, and Lynlee decided to open up her own business, a spa in downtown Columbia, Missouri. By all accounts, they seemed to be a happy family until 2017, when everything changed.
In June of 2017, Ben is murdered at his snake farm. 2.5 years go by with no answers. Investigators need a big break.
That break came in the form of an ex-boyfriend in early 2020. He was one of the men that Lynlee was having an affair with at the time of Ben's murder. Brandon Blackwell told police their relationship continued after Ben's death. They had a child together, and while they were together, Blackwell claims that Lynlee confessed to murdering Ben.
In the fall of 2019, Brandon and Lynlee's relationship begins to fall apart. It becomes apparently very, very contentious.
When Brandon and Lynlee break up, it is bad. It is bitter. They have a child together. There are custody issues. At one point, Lynlee takes out a restraining order against Brandon, and at that point, Brandon decides to go to investigators and tell them what he claims he knows about Ben Renick's death.
Blackwell is in jail with no bond for violating the restraining order Lynlee had against him, and he basically wants a get-out-of-jail-free card. So he decides to reveal Lynlee's secret.
According to Brandon Blackwell, Lynlee recruited an old boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, to shoot Ben. They drive out to the snake farm, and while they're driving out there, Ben is taking out some garbage. And Lynlee introduces Michael as an old friend who just wants to see some snakes.
They go back into the snake building. Ben is cleaning off a back wall. According to Brandon, Michael and Lynlee have now decided that it's going to be Lynlee that pulls the trigger.
So it's Lynlee that goes forward and does it. Lynlee's the one that decides, I'll be the one to shoot him, and it's Lynlee that shoots him.
Armed with this new information, investigators arrest Lynlee Renick for the murder of her husband, along with Michael Humphrey.
Sam called me, and he said, they're arresting them now. I was just like, how?
For the snake community and the family, this news is really hard to take. They had raised money and given tens of thousands of dollars to Lynlee and the kids. And now she might be the one responsible?
I talked to Lynlee. I've been face to face with Lynlee before. Like, she was always at the shows with Ben. I'd laughed with her, like we'd cracked jokes at Ben's booth. It was astounding.
We literally talked on the phone about a week and a half after this happened, and she was like you would expect. It wasn't cold, it wasn't anything. It was literally what you would expect from a wife losing her husband. If the devil was a person, I believe that was her.
The betrayal, that is so strong. How come we didn't see that?
In the weeks after Ben's murder in 2017, investigators knew Lynlee was involved. They interviewed her multiple times, but they just couldn't get anything out of her.
Do you have any thoughts or ideas, or do you know what happened tonight?
I don't.
Is there anything else you can think of that might be important?
Just days after Ben's murder, she told police she thought it was Sam, Ben's brother, who had killed Ben.
You know, Ben, I drugs do with games financially.
But that's really good there financial being, but I mean, Sam now has zero desire to leave the property and is talking about his keep on the property.
From the moment she's arrested, Lynlee says she's innocent, that the allegations are not true. But as time went by, more disturbing details would emerge.
Coming up, Lynlee Renick goes to trial.
The defendant, Lynlee Renick, shot her husband, Ben, 8 times.
And later, Lynlee tells her story to the jury.
All I can do now is just sit up here and tell the truth. And at least I will have gotten it out. And I won't have to carry it anymore.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
Lynlee Renick and her ex-boyfriend were both charged with Ben Renick's murder. And investigators were also looking at somebody else who was involved, Ashley Shaw. She was the manager of Lynlee Renick's spa.
Lynlee and one of her employees, Ashley Shaw, came up with this scheme to poison Ben by making a protein drink laced with Percocet. It didn't work and really just made Ben very sick.
Investigators also believed that Shaw was a part of the plan to shoot Ben, and they offered her a plea deal to testify against Lynlee. A year later, Lynlee's co-defendant Michael Humphrey would go to trial first. He claimed he knew nothing about a plot to murder Ben and only went with Lynlee to the snake farm to help her leave her husband. The jury didn't buy it and convicted him of murder. He ended up making a deal with the state that required him to come back to court and testify against Lynlee.
At this point, Michael Humphrey is convicted of first-degree murder, but if he cooperates, prosecutors are going to knock it down to second degree, in which case he'll be eligible for parole.
Then on December 6, 2021, 3.5 years after Ben Renick was shot and killed in his snake facility, his wife, Lynlee Renick, went on trial.
The defendant, Lynlee Renick, shot her husband, Ben, 8 times.
Prosecutors told jurors that Lynlee had multiple affairs during her marriage with Ben and that she wanted him dead, so much so that she tried to poison him and then, when that failed, ended up shooting him.
Lynlee is running a spa. This spa is losing money. So Ben and Lynlee are arguing over it. So Lynlee is also the sole beneficiary of the $1 million life insurance policy on Ben Renick. Decides she's going to kill him.
I think it was a trifecta of assets that and her affairs that led to this decision being made by her to do this. Ben would have gotten divorced and probably gotten the kids and probably not left her with much of anything. And I think she was very aware of that.
Lynlee's defense attorney told the jury a very different story. Yes, she was having affairs, but only because she needed the love that she wasn't getting from Ben. In fact, he would tell jurors that Lynlee was planning on leaving Ben because of the way he was treating her.
And begins touching her and begins doing things against her will while she's asleep. Lynlee starts coming to Essentia Spa with bruises on her arms. And she discusses these problems with Ashley Shaw.
As part of her deal with the state, Ashley Shaw had to testify against Lynlee.
She came to the spa one morning and said that she had woke up in the middle of the night and he was on top of her, inside of her, raping her while she was asleep.
Ben was not that kind of a person. He would have never raped somebody in the middle of the night. That would have never happened. It was all lies.
Ashley Shaw confesses to the jury her role in the poisoning and then shooting of Ben.
She said that he had resources to take her kids away. She said that she didn't really think of any other option and that she asked if I could help her with murdering him. I provided her with some pills and she blended them up in a blender and put them in a protein shake for him to drink. She called me and said that he was very sick all night, threw up, but he was still alive. She still wanted him killed.
Ashley, who avoided prison time by testifying, admitted on the stand to helping plan and cover up Ben's murder. She helped pick Michael Humphrey, she said, as an accomplice because he had a criminal record, and she gave Lynlee that shower after Ben was shot, which was an attempt to get rid of evidence. She told the jury she kept the secret for years, but the defense claimed that she was actually twisting the story, and to set the record straight, Lynlee was called to the witness stand.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, I'm Lynlee Renick.
Did you kill Ben?
I did not.
Did you help Michael Humphrey kill Ben?
I did not.
Did you ever want Ben dead?
I never wanted Ben dead.
During her hours on the witness stand, Lynlee would tell the jury that the only thing she wanted was a divorce, and how when she went to tell Ben with her friend Michael Humphrey, Ben somehow just ended up dead.
As we were getting out of the car, Ben was walking out of the facility and he had some bags of trash. And I just panicked and I was like, oh, this is Michael. He's an old friend of mine. Like, he's really interested in snakes. And I took the trash bags from Ben and then walked down to the dumpsters that we had. And Ben and Michael went on inside the facility. I walked up right behind Michael. I'm sorry. And then Michael turned around and I saw a gun in his hands, and then I heard shots ring out, and I screamed, and I ran outside. And then I heard more shots go off, and everything just went numb. And then Michael running out of the facility and pushing me towards the car and telling me, we have to go, Lynlee, get in the car. We have to go now.
Lynlee would tell the jury that Michael drove her to Ashley Shaw at the spa, where Ashley made Lynlee take a shower. Lynlee claimed that she didn't know why Ashley was telling her to take a shower, and that she was in such a state of shock that all she could do was hang on to whatever her friend was telling her.
Ashley told me, everything's okay, Lynlee. You were here, you never left, and everything's okay.
Lynlee also tried to explain away a number of things to the jury, including her multiple affairs while being married to Ben.
You had been completely keeping the affairs from him.
Yes.
Her initial denial that she knew anything about what happened that day he was murdered, and even threw in some disturbing allegations of sexual abuse.
Did these instances of Ben touching you or having sex with you without your consent while you were sleeping, did it happen more than once?
Yes. She built it all up. She built it all up to make it look like she was innocent, but she was putting everything into place to make it happen for her.
Coming up, would the jury buy Lynlee's story, or would they see her as a woman who shot and killed the man she vowed to love for money?
In every case, a jury certainly wants to know what's the motive. Now, that's not an element of the crime, but the prosecution in this case is going to say the motive was, of course, money.
Plus, the cross-examination.
The reality is that your husband was dead or dying back at this snake facility. That's the reality, correct?
And then, later, the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Lynlee Renick.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Lynlee Renick got on the stand and told the jury that even though she lied for years about knowing nothing about her husband Ben's murder in rural Missouri, that this time she was finally telling the truth.
Are you lying to this jury?
I'm not. I did not kill Ben, and I did not want him dead.
Originally, Lynlee lied to investigators about finding her husband dead on the floor of his snake facility. But between the murder and trial, she changed her story and now was admitting that she was actually there when Ben was shot. When it came time for cross-examination, prosecutor Kevin Zellner immediately went on the attack.
Instead of telling the police Michael Humphrey, you tell him Sam Renick.
Yes.
You throw the scent off of Michael Humphrey, correct?
Yes.
And now, those men sitting in the back that were seeking justice, who you lied to about the true killer, you now want these 12 people to believe you, correct?
Yes.
I bet you do.
Lynlee says she just wanted a divorce, that she brought her ex, Michael Humphrey, there for emotional support, and that when Ben was shot, she was in denial until she walked into the snake building an hour and a half after being there with Michael Humphrey.
I walked into the facility, and I was just walking through. And then I saw Ben laying down in a pile of blood.
Lynlee is asked why she didn't call 911 after she says Michael Humphrey shot her husband, and why she casually messaged both Humphrey and Ben as if nothing had happened.
I was trying very hard to just stay away from the thought and the reality that anything bad had happened to Ben.
Okay, but how old were you at the time this happened?
29.
Okay. You're an intelligent woman, correct?
I guess, yeah.
The reality was that your husband at that moment in time was dead or dying back at that snake facility, correct?
Yes.
You never called 911, did you?
After I got back, yes, but in that moment, no.
At 5:25, you text Mike, correct?
Yes.
Why don't, instead of texting your husband about the babysitter, why don't you just pick up the phone at that point in time and call him?
I don't know.
Well, the answer to that is, isn't it because you abused Dad?
No.
Okay.
She was asked why she never told anybody the story of Michael Humphrey shooting Ben until she was arrested.
You were interviewed by law enforcement a number of times, correct?
Yes.
And you lied to them every time.
Yes.
You knew who the real killer was, and you told the police, not Michael Humphrey, but they ought to investigate Sam, correct?
Yes.
Man, what kind of cold heart lies within you? Deep down in that heart of yours, and in that brain of yours, you know who killed him, correct?
Yes.
The state's theory was that Lynlee and Ashley convinced Michael Humphrey to kill Ben, but that Humphrey backed out at the last minute and that Lynlee ended up firing the gun herself. And they had Ashley Shaw, to back up their theory.
What does she tell you?
She said that Michael got too nervous or didn't want to do it, and so he handed her the gun and she actually killed him.
Who had $1 million life insurance policy on their head?
Ben.
Okay. And who was the sole beneficiary of that life insurance policy should he be killed on June 8th of 2017?
I believe me.
Michael Humphrey took the stand as part of his deal with the state.
She showed up at my driveway. She had a girl named Ashley with her. They wanted to try to find somebody to shoot him.
According to Michael Humphrey, Lynlee asked him multiple times to kill her husband. He claimed even when she told him she'd make it worth his while, he said no. But he did agree to go with her when she confronted Ben.
I was looking at a whole lot of snakes. And then I heard a shot come out. She was at the end of the corridor, or whatever you want to call it, posed up like this with the gun. It was a few seconds. She comes out the door, starts screaming at me to drive, basically.
The jury got the case on December 8th, 2021, and after deliberating for more than 12 hours, they came back with a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Lynlee Renick, guilty of murder in the second degree. Lynlee Renick guilty of armed criminal action.
The jury recommended only 13 years for the murder charge and 3 more for the armed criminal action. Lynlee was visibly relieved in the courtroom after hearing her sentence.
To this day, I truly believe that Lynlee Renick was the one that pulled the trigger, unloading 8 bullets into the back of my brother. She led me directly to my brother's body and then put on a show, an act, a display that will forever haunt me for the rest of my days. I beg the common person to watch the trial again and ask themselves if my brother's life was worth only 16 years.
And then it was time for the judge to speak. He clearly seemed very uneasy with the jury's decision to sentence Lynlee to just 16 years.
Somehow they got confused. In my view, taking you out of the equation, his brother would still be alive. At one minute, you want a divorce and to get Mr. Humphrey mad enough to kill, I don't know, it doesn't matter if he killed. You were the one that put him up to it. You're awful lucky, ma'am. You're gonna get out in your 40s, and my 40s weren't too bad. I just hope you don't kill again.
Did she ever believe that she was ever going to get away with it? Did she think that life would just go on forever?
Ben will never die because we all remember him here. We all talk about him. We all share pictures of him. His legacy of his kindness, the amazing animals he bred.
This is a Renick's ghost, and I was fortunate enough to get a pair from an individual, a friend of mine, who he bought them from Ben's directly. This here is a legacy of Ben Renick.
The real victims in all of this, unfortunately, are the children. You know, they're going to have to live with this for the rest of their lives.
I hope they can grow up and get past this, just like anybody that's in any kind of tragedy. I hope they can just get past this and have as normal life as you possibly can without your father.
Lynlee Renick appealed her conviction, but then dropped it in 2023. She is serving her time at a woman's prison in Livingston County, Missouri. She will be free before she turns 50 years old. I'm Ted Rollins. Thanks for watching Victim to Verdict.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.